was a picture. It was painted by, I think the artist's name was White. And the painting is hanging in Brown University. And it's the picture of a British officer during the Revolutionary War meeting with the Swamp Fox, Francis Marion, and his men. And they were back in the swamps of South Carolina. And it was kind of guerrilla warfare against the British. But anyway, they were exchanging prisoners. And General Marion was introducing the British officer to his men. And they happened to be roasting sweet potatoes for supper. And the British officer saw those potatoes. He had never seen potatoes before. And he called them roots. And he really was astounded. He said, he made a statement, he said, any young men that will fight and live on roots deserves to win this war. He went home and resigned his commission and quit because of that one happening. And so the story is, I heard Aunt Norma tell this story. I was maybe 10 or 12 years old. I was in the dining room with Mammy. She always had a gathering there in the dining room. Bessie was serving. You remember Bessie? So that's how long ago it was. But Aunt Norma was telling the story about that scene and during the Revolutionary War. And the story was that Uncle Thomas cooked the potatoes. Uncle Thomas was a private, and his older brother Isaac, which is our ancestor, was a private. They're very young men. Isaac was born in 1755, and Thomas was born in 1757. So they were 2 years apart. And they did things together. They were very good friends as well as soldiers together. And when the Revolutionary War ended, the government gave the veterans land. And so they gave Thomas and Isaac land in North Carolina. They sold that land and moved to Georgia. And then, with all the West opening up, years later, Isaac decided to move and just camp out or take a Spanish land grant in the Florida parishes, which was kind of wide open then. They didn't even know who owned it sometimes. And years later, Thomas followed him, and Thomas settled near Clinton, Louisiana, and Isaac settled in Burke, Mississippi, close to Liberty. And that's how we all started from Liberty. So Aunt Norma told that story about the potatoes, and that story had been handed down through the generations. And we all laughed. We didn't think it was true. But the painting shows the private Thomas with the potatoes and a slave, and it shows the General Marion and the British officer. And it even shows another Revolutionary War painted veteran, and that is probably Isaac. And that picture, as I said, is in Brown University. Isaac came to Amite County in 1801. And at that time, the Creek Indians were pretty strong in Alabama and Mississippi. So they had to get a, what they call, it was a passport from the governor of Georgia to go through the Creek Indian Nation on the way to Mississippi. And I have a photocopy from the archives in Jackson, Mississippi, of what that passport looked like. This one, the photograph was made from the 1811 Isaac Jackson. That was probably his son. But our ancestor Isaac came in 1801. And this passport is 1811. And you can see on the back it says passport, and it lists the names Isaac Jackson and 2 other people. And so that's how they got here. And we don't have the original of Isaac's in 1801, but they do have in their records the passport that Isaac got. That passport through the Creek Nation to the Western Territory, be prepared for the following persons: Thomas Toller, Isaac Jackson, Isham Jackson, and Reuben Jackson, and Frances, a woman. Yes. And we think that's Isaac's son and his friends. Let's see here. Oh yeah, years ago, I was in Louisville, Kentucky, And I remembered another story Aunt Norma and Aunt Sadie told about our great-grandfathers. Thomas Jefferson Jackson, Gramps' father, and William Bradford Kinnebrew. That's our grandmother Roch's father. They were both doctors. And as young men, they got on a steamboat in Natchez and rode it to Louisville, Kentucky, where this new medical student just opened up. Tulane was the first one, and then Louisville. And I'd always heard the story from Aunt Sadie and Aunt Norma that they attended the medical school together there. At that time, the medical school was named something else. But when I was in Louisville, I went to the University of Louisville Medical School just to see if they had any records. And sure enough, I had this good librarian who went in the archives, and they found the brochures that the medical school put out, and it's even got Dr. Kinnebrew and Dr. Jackson's names on the list of students. I had it highlighted there. So they were there together in 1849. And there was a slave auctioning block just down the street from where they were. In those days, the doctors in training only stayed for the winter months. In the spring, they had to go home and help with the crops. And they had a real strange schedule, and they had to be recommended by a doctor from wherever they came from. And they were recommended by this doctor, and that's how they got into medical school. Oh, yeah, okay. Years ago, also a friend that I knew in Clinton, Louisiana, he had access to an old antebellum house in Amite County near Berwick, and it was it burned, or it was closed. Anyway, before it burned, some of the descendants of the family that owned it went through the house, and they found in an old desk an original roster of students, children, and their fathers. And Moses Jackson is one of the fathers, and Thomas Tillman Toller is one of the fathers, and the Causeys, and several other Jacksons who were probably Moses' brothers. And it's got the ages of the children, 13, 10, 12, 8, and it's got each of them's cost for the year. And the whole cost for all of them added up to $77.25. And then it's got on the back professor who taught the school, the teacher, and his name was Weathersby. But that was in 1861, and we know that Moses joined the Confederacy very early, so it was probably the year he joined the Confederacy. And he was in all the battles. He was at Shiloh, Franklinton. He was with Lee at the end. And his archives are all in the Amite County Courthouse in Liberty. Also, this was about 20 years ago. I went to Berwick, and I'd read about where you could take this, it's called Pellon, I think. It's kind of a liner that women used to wear under their skirts. It's like light cotton. And you can get a dark, like black crayon, and you put the Pellon over the tombstones and rub the black crayon, and you can get rubbings that way. And so I got rubbings of our ancestor Isaac, and Isaac's tombstone has been replaced. If you're a veteran's family, you can call the government and they'll replace the tombstones for you. So that's a replaced tombstone. That's in Berwick. They're all buried in Berwick. And Isaac's son, Willie Jackson, was in the Battle of New Orleans with Andrew Jackson. And Willie Jackson was the captain in that battle. And if you remember your history, that battle was fought a full 2 weeks after the war was over. It took them that long to get the word. I think the treaty was signed in Europe. So it was a good while before the Americans knew that the war was over. So that battle was fought late. And the other pictures I have, I've got rubbings of Isaac, as I said, and Willie, and Uncle Mose, they called him, Moses Jackson. And This is a rubbing of Dr. Thomas Jefferson Jackson, who was Gramps' father. And Gramps was born in Berwick, and when the house was still standing, I took its picture. It's been torn down now, but this was like 20 years ago. And that's Dr. Thomas Jefferson's house in Berwick. And of course, this is Mammy's house. Got his picture. It's still there. And a lot of us, during World War II, when we were all kids, stayed at that house, lived with Mammy, off and on. That's about all I have. I have a picture of the 1975 reunion in the group. That was the year my oldest child was born. Mipsy was pregnant with him at that reunion. That's all I have.
I have got the Canterbury's diploma from that.
Yeah, Roxy told me. Thank you.
I'm sorry I didn't bring it, but I do have Dr. Canterbury's